Chapter 10, Wired. The Vagos rumbled east on the I-10 through the San Gorgonio Pass, then turned north on the 29 Palms Highway, passing beyond the mountains and into the brick red hills of the Mojave. Although I didn't realize it at the time, this was the same track Kilo and Rhino had followed as they hauled Dennis Shorty Dojas in the bed of Kilo's pickup truck, rolled in the carpet, and headed for execution. Hanging with the Vagos was not my idea of keeping good company, but I must admit, I enjoyed running with the herd during my time undercover. Man, if you love riding motorcycles like I do, there's nothing like screaming down the highway with a pack of Harleys rolling in a tight formation. Front tire a foot off the wheel of the man in front, hands high on the bars, and the straight pipes clapping like thunder. It's one hell of a head rush. I would have enjoyed the ride even more. The poor bastards behind me were zigzagging and cursing as they dodged my flying debris. But losing that rat bike one piece at a time was not my primary concern as we thundered toward Yucca Valley. Nope, I had much bigger problems because old Crash was running right beside me. Thing is, when you were barreling ass along the open road at 90 miles per hour, you really wanted to trust the rider in the saddle next to you. Unfortunately, because we were both prospects, the man was usually Crash. And that son of a bitch scared the hell out of me. The entire trip, I've been cheating my wheel ahead of his because no way did I want to get caught running behind that uncoordinated fuck. I was just beginning to think I was home free when sure enough, there went Crash. I veered away sharply as he bounced off the blacktop and his Harley went somersaulting down the road, throwing off pieces of chrome and steel. It was a miracle no one else went down because I'd witnessed that ugly scene before. I'd watched packs with over 200 riders suddenly fly all to pieces. Many machines tumbled and tossed like jacks across the freeway. And when something like that happened and the dust settled, it was like bloody carnage across the battlefield. As we hauled Crash's busted carcass off the pavement, the first word out of his mouth was, "Pothole." Bullshit, there was no fucking pothole. That was just Crash doing what Crash always did best. After the pack dusted itself off, we started north again on the highway. Just as we were approaching Yucca Valley, a shitbox sedan with missing hubcaps appeared ahead, steering close to the road's apron to allow the horde to pass. When it came my turn, I was surprised to see John Carr behind the wheel. His hand was raised against his chest as he was flipping me the finger. The pack veered off the highway and started down a long dirt road that plugged straight into our destination, a biker bar out in the middle of the desert. Several Vago chapters were there when we arrived, along with riders from the Vietnam Vets and some of the other law enforcement clubs. Can't remember for sure which ones, but I believe the Blue Knights were there. I dismounted the Harley and was about to rest my saddle sore ass when I heard the words I would come to dread. "Hey prospect," some bearded asshole with Loki on his back was pointing toward a porta potty standing out amongst the rocks. "Climb up that shit shed over there and sing us the prospect song." Like I've said, when a patch member gives a prospect an order, you follow it, no matter how humiliating. I climbed onto a boulder, then pulled myself onto the roof of one of the porta potty toilets scattered throughout the property. And there, atop my magnificent porta potty stage, I faced an audience of 200 to 300 bikers and began to sing. I am a Vagos prospect, as you can clearly see. As I sang atop the portable toilet, I recall thinking that old Joe had been right. Signing up with the ATF had been one really dumbass move. That's about when the shed began to tip. I shifted my weight quickly when it was already too late. Gravity had me. All of a sudden I was going one way. The shit shed was headed the other. And what had been dumped from hundreds of bowels and bladders went splashing across the desert. The audience must have loved it though, judging by the cheers and applause that followed my big finish. I needed a fucking drink. As the bikers cleared a wide path to the bar, I spotted a familiar face among them. It was the young sheriff from Riverside, my stalker with the badge who'd flown a helicopter all the way to Los Angeles to win me over. The lawman was trying to blend in with the crowd, but the scowl aimed my way was pretty obvious. John Carr had told the sheriff I decided against becoming an informant. Yet here I was, riding with the Vagos, and the bloom was off the rose. I ignored my spurned lover, wiped shit from my shoes, and entered the bar. The interior was crammed shoulder to shoulder with Vagos, vets, biker cops, and women. And by women, I mean Vagos old ladies and chicks wearing low-cut shirts and high-cut shorts. On those groupies, guess the patch and the Harley must have been some kind of aphrodisiac that made good girls want the bad guys. I swear you could take the ugliest motherfucker on the planet, stick a patch on his back and a motorcycle under his ass, and he'd have the hottest chicks in the bar hanging off his arm. Unfortunately, in the outlaw world, it wasn't uncommon for some of those young ladies to get pimped by the club. Females were little more than property to most of these guys, and they'd pass them around like puff parties and chicken wings. Over near the bar, Big Todd was engaged in a conversation with a barrel-chested dude sporting thick tattooed arms. This was Crusher, the sergeant detective from Cathedral City and president of the Vagos Support Club, the Green Machine. Todd waved me over, but I wasn't prepared to mingle just yet. My recording device had yet to be activated. Besides, Sergeant Crusher made me nervous. My prospect application had sailed through when that crooked cop had run it for red flags. The ATF had plenty of safeguards in place, but that didn't make me any more comfortable being around him. I was fine with Crusher busting his Mexican drug dealers and taking their money, but that fucker was part of the law enforcement fraternity, and cops talk to cops. There was always that chance, however slim, that somehow, some way, something might slip. When I'd first mentioned Crusher to John Carr, he was surprised the sergeant and other lawmen holding hands with the Vagos hadn't shown up on ATF's radar. John wanted to nail those dirty bastards in the worst way, especially Crusher. But the situation was tricky. If word got out that the sergeant was being internally investigated, the Vagos might get suspicious and start hunting for another snitch like Hammer. It was a serious operational security issue that John had to yet fully resolve. I waved Todd off, then pushed through the packed house to the bathroom where I waited in line for a toilet to open. Once inside the stall, I activated the recording device, flushed the toilet, and headed out again. Slipping back into the crowd, I was having flashbacks to the nerve-wracking day when I walked into the Lady Luck wearing that big-ass recorder strapped to my chest. But the nervousness evaporated as confidence grew. The recording device was practically undetectable, I realized, and no one was paying attention to me anyway. They could care less about George Rowe. I was just another bald-headed, tattooed son of a bitch in a room crawling with them, especially mine. I was Todd's personal ATM, constantly spitting cash. And it was all withdrawals, man, never a deposit. For every buck that went out, not a damn cent came back. In the old days, I would have backed a U-Haul to Big Todd's front door and cleaned house. Hey, Big George, got 20 bucks I can borrow? Make mine a Corona, I told him, handing over to Jackson. I scanned the crowded bar as I waited on my beer and spotted Terry the Tramp sitting at a table in the far corner with some of the national officers. Sitting next to the International P was his secretary treasurer, a burly Chicano with the name Tata stitched over the right pocket of his cut. Tata was a tough, 39-year-old hombre who wouldn't hesitate to beat down another patch if he had it coming, even one of his own. But as far as I could tell, the man also had respect for the civilian world. In one of the big national runs, some no-class Vago had ripped off another vendor selling custom knives. Tata ordered every patch to buy a knife from that civilian and apologized on behalf of the brother who ripped him off. I think if Tata had been the man in charge and known how Big Roy and his thugs were harassing the people of Hemet, he might have pulled their patches. Here you go, prospect. Big Todd handed the bottle across to me without change, and I wandered off toward the tramp's table for a closer look at God. As I sipped beer and pretended not to listen, a burst of laughter from the table announced the arrival of a massive biker wearing a greasy t-shirt that read, "I support the Vagos." This man giant who strode from the crowd was probably late 50s, well over 6 feet tall and 300 pounds, with a fat, bushy beard and hair flowing to the middle of his back. Tramp shouted at him, "Hey Bubba," and stood to greet the big biker. "How you been, Tramp?" "Boom, Bubba," as the two clasped hands and hugged. "When you coming into the green?" Tramp chided. "No disrespect, you know I love you guys, but that's not my bag," said the big biker, who then threw out his arms and said, "I want to ride the way I want to ride, when I want to ride." Fucking A, laughed Tata as he clasped Bubba's big meaty hand, adding no disrespect. Asking around, I learned Bubba was well known and well liked among the one percenters. Just a friendly old bastard who loved to ride motorcycles. The big biker was tight with practically every stripe of Southern California outlaw. Boggles, Hells Angels, Mongols, Devil's Disciples, completely colorblind when it came to the patch. As Bubba bullshitted with Tramp, I noticed Rhino watching me more closely, so I stopped holding up the wall and pushed my back toward the bar. Big Todd was gone when I arrived, no doubt chasing his next free drink, but there was someone sitting at the far end that interested me. A Vago named Sammy who rode with the San Bernardino crew. Sammy was good buddies with North, the Hemet chapter sergeant at arms, who was fencing stolen property for his brother from San Berdue. I greeted him with a friendly, "Hey Sammy, how you doing, man?" He was already half in the bag and didn't seem to recognize me at first. I squeezed in beside his stool and slapped a fraternal hand on his shoulder. "It's George Rowe from Hemet, man." "Oh, sure," said Sammy. "How you doing, brother?" "I'm good. Heard you guys had some excitement in Purdue, huh?" "That right?" "Yeah, I heard Hulk got busted." Sammy turned away and resumed drinking. Don't know much about that. I learned later that in fact Sammy knew nothing about that. He paid $3,000 to Shorty for a stolen motorcycle that was never delivered, and ultimately that's what got the hangaround executed. Turned out Sammy was also in the truck with Rhino and Kilo as they drove toward Landers with poor Shorty rolled in the carpet like a bloody burrito. Sammy never made it though. On the way to the execution, he got cold feet and asked to be dropped off at a biker bar called The Crossroads. Now, here he sat as an unindicted accessory to murder. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time, but Sammy sure was fidgeting on his stool like he had been a naughty boy. "Yeah, man," I said after taking another swig of beer. "Think the cops busted Holt for killing that hang-around in Landers." I swear Sammy went white when he heard that. "Don't know anything about it," he answered abruptly. Then he knocked back the rest of his drink and cleared the stool. As I watched Sammy disappear into the packed room, a muffled pop came from somewhere outside the bar. Apparently, everyone else heard it too, because heads snapped to attention like a herd of nervous antelope. All those outlaws, cops, vets, knew exactly what that sound was, a gunshot. I fell in with the crowd as they funneled through the front door and emerged in the brilliant desert sunlight. I was drawn with the others toward the commotion in the parking lot, but found myself blocked by a knot of pissed-off bikers. As I squeezed past them, I saw the reason for their anger. A wounded Vietnam vet lying bloody on the ground, cradled by one of his buddies. Some of the biker cops were surrounding the pair with guns drawn, and a bunch of revenge-minded vets were edging closer. I asked the Vago next to me what happened. "Fucking pigs shot him." "Why? What'd he do?" "Not a goddamn thing," said a vet standing to my left. "The cop was disrespecting our brother, so we went after him. That's when the cop pulls out his fucking gun. Pig gets a gun and badge and thinks he's above the law," growls the Vago. He had the biker cops put away their weapons, then cuffed the wounded vet on the ground. An angry murmur spread through the crowd. "You cocksuckers. You cocksuckers," one outlaw shouted. "They shit on our Constitution and wiped their friggin' asses with the Bill of Rights," grumbled another. I'd heard the outlaws lament before, but now I had it recorded. Special Agent Carr might appreciate that one. A few days after the desert run, in what will become our weekly Friday ritual, John and I met at the Little Luau Hawaiian Barbecue in Beaumont. I asked about the vet who got shot, but John hadn't heard any news. When lunch was over, we headed out to his expedition to download the recordings and switch out to a fresh device. "I don't think there's much you can use here," I warned him as we piled into the car. "You'd be surprised," said John. "It's like I told you before, sometimes what you think is meaningless turns out to be the most important thing." "Yeah, well, I'm just saying." John began setting up the device for a download. "So this guy Sammy was the only Purdue member you spoke with?" "There was one other patch, but he didn't say shit. I got the feeling Sammy knew something, but not this other guy." "What's this other guy's name?" Don't remember. Don't think he ever told me." John shot me a look of reproach. "He's recorded, as far as I know." "Listen, George, it's critical when you're undercover to ID the voice. If you're talking to someone, say the name out loud. Same thing with the license plate. Say it so you've got it. If the recorder's not on, go somewhere and turn it on. Then speak the name or the number or whatever. And don't try to keep it in your head either. If you wait more than a day, forget it. You'll never remember. Fuck, I said, exasperated. John smiled at this. Don't worry, dude. You'll get the hang of it. Just remember, the case is in the details. Tell me again, I grumbled. John ignored this. Anyway, listen, there's operational security issues we need to discuss here. What do we know about this Cathedral City cop? Crusher? Hey man, that's your call, but he's goddamn scary. If it was up to me, I'd get rid of him. Yeah, I think you're right, replied John as he finished the download. I'm going to talk to Stan Henry. He's the chief out there. I know he's got a huge interest in fighting gangs in the Coachella Valley. When he learns one of his men working in the Vagos, he's gonna shit a brick. Cops investigating cops was skeptical. You really think he'll go after one of his own, I asked? Henry's a stand-up guy, replied John as he handed me a fresh device. He'll get to the bottom of it. We've just got to step carefully and keep the source confidential. Last thing we need is your name floating around. Couldn't agree more. One slip and George Edgar Rowe would crash and burn like the fucking Hindenburg.